Okay, hi everybody. I know it's been a while since we put up a video, but I'm going to go ahead and finish reading the facts of our complaint. So I left off on fact 43, so I'm going to start with fact 44. So in January of 2008, defendant Nike told the EEOC that they had shut down Exeter Brands Group, LLC, and that was the actual reason why plaintiff R. Stevens was laid off from Nike. And you can look up Exeter Brands Group. Please feel free to do that. On January 22nd, 2008, defendant OHSU ran a full metabolic workup on plaintiff Q. Stevens and discovered that she was in internal distress and suffering from sepsis, liver damage, low white blood cell count, and kidney distress. Defendant OHSU did not treat plaintiff Q. Stevens and did not inform plaintiff K&R Stevens of her condition. On January 30th, 2008, the EEOC dismissed all of plaintiff R. Stevens' discrimination charges with indeterminate findings. Oh, whoa. Sorry, the screen just went. On February 26, 2008, the depositions of defendant Burkholder, defendant McQuiston, Sophie Burkholder, plaintiff Q. Stevens, and plaintiff K. Stevens were taken. Defendant Kocher advised plaintiff K. Stevens not to attend the depositions, and she did not attend them. So as the guardian ad litem, I was supposed to, but he told me not to. On April 11, 2008, plaintiff K, R, and Q. Stevens attended a mediation conference with defendant Lockenmeyer held by defendant John Barker. Defendant Kocher counseled plaintiff K. Stevens to walk out of the mediation. On June 6, 2008, plaintiff R. Stevens filed suit against Nike Exeter Brands Group for sex discrimination, sexual harassment, retaliation, and defamation. By this time, obviously, Renee had been able to get work, and his retirement was rapidly running out, so we basically we were looking at losing everything. On June 30th, 2008, defendant Lockenmeyer deposed plaintiff R. Stevens for several hours. On August 11th and 12th, 2008, plaintiff Q. Stevens went to trial against defendant McQuiston, presided over by defendant Judge Michael McShane. Defendant Burkholder and defendant McQuiston admitted in sworn testimony to playing a naked game in the bathroom called Little House on the Prairie with plaintiff Q. Stevens and Sophie Burkholder. Defendant McQuiston testified that she burned plaintiff Q. Stevens with scalding hot water from a tea kettle. And she actually said that she did not feel responsible at all, even though she totally poured the water on Kadira. There were no law enforcement officials, doctors, expert witnesses, or anyone who testified in the trial besides defendant Burkholder, defendant McQuiston, Sophie Burkholder, plaintiff K. Stevens, and plaintiff R. Stevens. Plaintiff Q. Stevens did not attend the trial. Thank goodness. We decided that she was too traumatized to do that. Plaintiff Q. Stevens' deposition was read to the court by opposing counsel, defendant Betsy Fernley, which, I mean, I don't know why Scott would have not brought Kadira to her own trial. On August 12, 2008, defendant Susan Glosser, presiding juror, returned a no negligence verdict in favor of defendant McQuiston. And actually, the jury deliberated for 10 minutes, and they came out of the jury room laughing after looking at pictures of our burned up daughter. It was pretty bizarre. And then later I found out that Susan Glosser, she's a professor at Lewis and Clark University, and I'm pretty sure she knows the Burkholders. So, because I did confront her, and she almost like slammed the door in my face, and it was just bizarre. Anyway, on August 13th, 2008, defendant Kocher told plaintiff K. Stevens to button it down and walk away after having a meeting with her and plaintiff R. Stevens at their home. Yeah, this guy got in my face, and he said, "You need to button it down and walk away." It was crazy, okay? Like being in a Lifetime original movie. On approximately August 14th, 2008, plaintiff K&R Stevens contacted Portland Police Bureau, and defendant Officer Mulberry responded. Plaintiff K&R Stevens were informed by defendant Mulberry that they were not allowed to file a police report. Plaintiff K. Stevens contacted the district attorney's office and was told that she could not press charges without a police investigation. On August 16, 2008, plaintiff R. Stevens took plaintiff Q. Stevens to the downtown Portland police station and reported plaintiff Q. Stevens' burn injury to defendant Officer Miller. Defendant Miller took the report and told plaintiff R. Stevens that what plaintiff Q. Stevens had experienced was at least reckless endangerment, although we do know now, as defined by law, it was child abuse, obviously. Plaintiff K&R Stevens pulled plaintiff Q. Stevens' court file to try to figure out what had happened. Defendant Paul Schoen, who was one of the court clerks, told plaintiff K&R Stevens that there was no record of the evidence that went back to the jury. So he said there was no record of the evidence that went back to the jury. How could that possibly be? I mean, seriously. Plaintiff Kay Stevens visited the home of defendant Glosser in an attempt to figure out what evidence had gone back to the jury at trial. Defendant Glosser was very nasty. This was the Susan Glosser who was the presiding juror. Was very nasty to Plaintiff Kay Stevens and said that Plaintiff Kay Stevens was crazy and that defendant McQuiston and defendant Burkholder had paid all of Plaintiff Q Stevens' medical bills, which was not at all what happened. Defendant Glosser slammed the door in Plaintiff Kay Stevens' face, threatening to call the police if Plaintiff Kay Stevens did not get off her property. Defendant Glosser's husband reiterated to Plaintiff Kay Stevens that defendant McQuiston and defendant Burkholder had done nothing wrong and that she should leave the property, and Plaintiff Kay Stevens complied. Plaintiff Kay Stevens contacted defendant Sergeant Dan Blue, who is the head of the child abuse team for the Portland Police Bureau, and described what happened to Plaintiff Q Stevens. Defendant Sergeant Dan Blue firmly told Plaintiff Kay Stevens that the Portland Police do not investigate this type of thing. Oh yes, he did. He was super duper foul on the phone. Defendant Lou was rude and argumentative with Plaintiff Kay Stevens and terminated their phone conversation by hanging up on her. Keep in mind, all the while, Kadira is basically dying from internal distress. After the verdict was rendered in Plaintiff Q Stevens' case, defendant Kocher refused to prosecute her case any further. He was so rude. On August 18th, 2008, Plaintiff Kay Stevens filed a bar complaint against defendant Kocher, alleging that he was incompetent or criminally negligent. On August 28th, 2008, defendant Ferdusi Chowdhury, who worked for DHS, conducted a home visit and interviewed Plaintiff Q Stevens. Defendant Chowdhury did not interview defendant Burkholder, defendant McQuiston, or Sophie Burkholder, so DHS never went to their house. Plaintiff Kay Stevens retained Stephen P. Reidlinger of Suzak and Powell to motion for a new trial, which was denied with extreme bias by defendant McShane on August 29, 2008. He was so rude because basically he was covering up a crime and he's foul and he's a federal judge, so whatever. Plaintiff K&R Stevens spoke with Robin Morrison, principal of Hayhurst Elementary School and a representative for Portland Public Schools, about Plaintiff Q Stevens' burn injury and the improper use of the Odyssey program materials as a defense at the trial of Plaintiff Q Stevens, and to inform the school that the Stevens children should have no contact with defendant Burkholder and defendant McQuiston. Portland Public Schools stated that they would move Plaintiff Q Stevens out of the Odyssey program and speak to defendant Burkholder and defendant McQuiston. Defendant Portland Public Schools continued to allow defendant Burkholder and defendant McQuiston to volunteer at Hayhurst Elementary School despite Plaintiff Q Stevens' burn injury and despite being informed of the circumstances surrounding the injury. So the school did nothing because Todd Burkholder is related to Rex and they wanted him to keep coming there and volunteering because that's what he was doing, bringing press to their program. And so they told us that Kadira could leave the program. So that's what they did. They threw Kadira out of the program. And mind you, all the while, for what she suffered, she got, after the trial, she got nothing. Plus, she was still in internal distress and they continued to lie to us. So, as you can see how this plays out. Plaintiff K&R Stevens enrolled Plaintiff Q Stevens into counseling at LifeWorks for the entire year that Plaintiff Q Stevens attended the 4th grade. On September 2nd, 2008, Plaintiff R. Stevens filed his 3rd amended complaint against defendant Nike Exeter Brands Group, claiming specifically, and I'll do that on another video. Could you change it? It'll just be a second. And we're going to read the entire complaint against Nike so you can really see what was alleged.